Good evening and welcome to our April Committee of the Whole meeting. This is a meeting where we review the agenda items for our May regular board meeting. It is a pretty short agenda tonight. I'm going to start with roll call. Director Zavala,
Here.
Director Decker,
I'm here.
Director Smith,
Here.
Director Barrows,
Here.
and I'm also here. I will turn it over to Dr. Snell to walk us through the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sproul, and thank you all for being here. We are previewing the May regular board meeting agenda. And so we don't have a lot of items at this time scheduled for that meeting. I will do a superintendent report as usual and give an update on where we're at with our budget development process and the reduction in force process. I know in speaking with you, just trying to communicate with people, it seems like there's just misperceptions or misinformation or just questions that continue to arise. And so using that as an opportunity to share, I think is really important. We are this week starting now our bumping process with our certificated staff members. And so there's some notification that went out yesterday to staff that are affected. And now there's an opportunity to share some preferences and to review endorsements and certifications, and now trying to place them all across the district. Then for ones that there aren't openings, going through the seniority process and potentially some more non-renewal notices if there aren't placements for people. And so I know this process has been excruciating for you all throughout it. We are moving probably 2 or 3 weeks to being finished with the process. And then it's looking at, potential recall or looking at enrollment patterns or, things of that nature, working through the contract negotiations and whatever impact that may have. And so there still are lots of moving parts to this. I know that sometimes you're getting advocacy about class size or about certain situations. And even in my role, I don't know all those situations as the schools are building those schedules and we're trying to place people. But if students are forecasting for classes, and there's enough students in those classes that want them, then it's very likely that we would continue those classes. Where it gets kind of tough is if you have very few students or 15 students that were wanting something, then how do we offer that? What does that look like? Maybe it can't be offered this year, but could we offer it the next year, or however we might be able to manage some of those challenges at the school level. So I know you're all aware of those things, but I always feel like it's an opportunity to just raise it up. And so a little bit here and more at the May 14th. Yeah, remember exactly what day that is of our regular meeting. So I'll go ahead and move into the agenda items if that's okay. All right, I'm sharing my screen. That come up for everyone? Okay. So under contracts, we actually don't have any contracts to date for approval. That's why Brett isn't on the call tonight to walk you through some of those. So and our policy, we're at a point where we're okay with our policy updates, so that that right now isn't on the schedule. I know that some of you are still looking at potential policies, and Taylor mentioned that if we get some feedback or different questions, that those might come forward. But we don't have any right now scheduled for this. Under teaching and learning, we do have some instructional materials for consideration. And for those that are maybe tuning in, these are, we have an instructional materials committee that has the responsibility of bringing forth recommendations to you, and those are linked in this report. When you go and drill down into the report, you and the public have access to, when it loads, we can show that, to the title of the book, the grade levels, any concerns, summary, the meeting notes for how it was discussed. And when you look at this, I know that the challenging content is something that we look at often. And so there are a couple of texts that do have some challenging comments. You can see in the after is a secondary book, post-apocalyptic dystopian novel, and some violence, and things of that nature, sexual assault. When you look down, internment, is about an internment camp for Muslim American citizens. Again, it has some violence in there. And then there was one down here as well, the memory police, a high school text that was flagged for sexual incidents within the text. So just always want to call those to your attention. And if you review these and look at the meeting notes, if you have any questions about those, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll make sure that we can give you more context with that. Okay, I'll move on to the next two items. We have two out-of-state travel requests, both for VSAA orchestra going to Carnegie Hall. Pretty impressive. And then we have the VSAA dance going to the national competition at in Pittsburgh. And I believe that these are experiences that students have had before. And in particular, I remember the dance festival. We were highlighting some of those award winners, I think, at a board meeting. So those two are up for consideration. Okay. And then I did want to call attention to the personnel report. We had some questions about this. Normally the personnel report is always just on the agenda. There are different kinds of things that the board needs to approve, resignations, hiring, different things of that nature. In this situation, because of the reduction in force, all of the happenings of that will be reflected in the May personnel report. And so just know that's typically a consent agenda item. That will be on the May agenda, and then the board would take action on the employment report, which would then make all those things official. And you can see, I asked just because of the nature of the reduction in force that our HR team would share kind of where we're at in that process and how those names would find their way onto the employment report. And so that information is here for you. Of course, the employment report it'll look like the typical employment report for you. But I also think it'll be important for us to call that out in the regular meeting in May to just let folks know that this is what's happening.
Jeff, I have a question about that. Is that then just going to include like the first round of like provisional employees that were told, they're not going to be renewed? Or is that also going to, because I know some employees are like with the bumping, or it's like they're, I don't know the right word for it, but
it won't
be reassigned, or they're kind of in that pool. Is that, I mean, how detailed is it going to get, or how many people?
So it won't, my understanding, and I could, as not the HR expert, but my understanding is it wouldn't include displaced people, like in terms of moving across to different locations or saying, that Jeff Snell's moving from McLaughlin to Fort Vancouver. I think that contract status is the same. It's just I have a different location. But what it would include is anybody that was non-renewed. And so those provisionals that you mentioned would be included in that. And then also any other staff members, whether it's VEA or other employment groups that are not having their contract renewed as a part of this process would be included as well. And so that could be some of our continuing certificated teachers when we go through this process of bumping. If there aren't spots for them, then they potentially would be reflected in here as well. And we do have a May 15th deadline by statute of notifying our certificated staff members of this. So basically anybody that we weren't certain to have a contract for next year would be reflected in this employment report. There's a possibility we could bring people back for sure afterwards, but we would need to meet that deadline and that notification.
So then if we do bring people back, it would need to be reflected on the employment report again. But would it be then, they wouldn't be considered like a new hire, right? Or would it?
Right. I think we would, probably each situation is going to be unique between the employee groups and what that recall process looks like. And so before we would start doing that, we would brief you all on this is what it will look like in the employment report and why.
Okay. Because there's so many like unknowns or like potential things. I just wasn't sure if it goes into an employment report, like how final it is or how it's reflected on. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
thinking about the
I think your question is a good one, and your point that it would be on a following employment report, right? Because we're bringing somebody back from this non-renewal status, and my interpretation is that the board would need to act on that because we didn't issue a contract and now we are.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense.
okay. So that I know, we won't have an executive session at the May meeting, but we will have an opportunity today to go into executive session to discuss the performance of a public employee. So that's all that's on the agenda right now. We will have our usual recognitions on the agenda and an update. This time we have an in-person workshop in April. But we like to bring what the learning was in the study session, whatever and me to present some of that in the superintendent's report as well in May. So that's what I have, Director Sproul. So I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions about next month's agenda? Okay. With that, we will recess to executive session for personnel to discuss the performance of a public employee. And I will return at 6:11 to check back in. We do not anticipate any action. Thank you. Hello, welcome back. Our executive session concluded at 6:11 p.m. and I am here to adjourn our meeting. Thank you so much.